It's my pleasure now, as he's just arrived into the room, to invite on stage Microsoft's CEO, Steve Ballmer, who's here for the day. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Can I just welcome you to this event? And
Sure.
Thanks for sparing this time.
Thank you. Thanks to Andy. Thanks to all of you. I appreciate the time. I looked through the roster. We've got a good percentage of our biggest customers in the UK here, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It's great. I've got them using words like roster. I've got them on an airline speech already. It's fantastic. Excellent. So we've got a few questions we're going to go through, and then we're going to open up to the audience. I guess the start point for me, I've been in IT a while, as the guys know, because I was talking earlier. And when I started, you could put the Microsoft organization chart on a wall in 2 A4 pieces of paper. These days, I think you'd need a projector on the side of a small building to do the same thing. It's changed a lot in the time, and it's become a big company. Most commonly looked at as a devices and services company. I just wondered, how is Microsoft changing, and how are organizations going to experience this change?
Well, I joined Microsoft. I avoid saying this in general in press. 32 years ago. It sounds out of date in a certain sense. And when I joined Microsoft, it was, I was joining in a sense almost religiously a software company, a company whose job was to do all of the software for the new computers. And that was a great proposition. And I think if you were to advise a young kid coming out of school today, what's the best profession on the planet to learn in terms of employability, software would be right there at the head of the pack. On the other hand, as we look forward, kind of to our future, we're finding we're not only reimagining our flagship product, Windows, we're reimagining how we go to market in many senses and what our businesses are. And I would say today, while our core skill will remain software, I think of us as a devices and services company. Devices that come with our software, that come with our consumer services often built in, devices that can be further switched on and controlled and secured by enterprise services. I think actually most consumer services will actually come built into the device, and then it's not only about bring your own devices, it'll be about bring your own cloud, and we're going to have to help our enterprise customers deal with the combination of those two factors. I'm not trying to say we need to build every computer on the planet or build every phone. That's not what I'm trying to say. But when people ask me what our products are, I say it's the Acer Aspire S7. That would be the name of one of our products. I can't just say it's Windows, because it's Windows as it lands on some of the beautiful devices that you see over there and many others. This is a Nokia Lumia 920. This is our product. I can't tell you our product is something else. It's not Windows Phone in general. It's this product. It's the HTC product. So I think of us as a devices and enterprise services company, because I think while most of the business we do with you today is, quote, software, if we just all sort of scratched our heads and said 10 years from now, are you going to buy software, or are you mostly going to be buying services from us, whether those are kind of platform services or application level services? I think the answer is services. How quickly we get there, can we prove that we've got all the right stuff versus our competition versus running your own data centers? That's not going to be a quick overnight transition, but it's one that you've got to build for. You have to have the capability to get. So we are reimagining Windows. We've reimagined it at the chip level, the system level. We have phones and tablets and notebooks that are all Windows now with the advance of 8. We have a different UI paradigm that we're bringing to market, but we're also reimagining the company. That's also true, by the way, in a skill set. Now we have to run large internet-scale data centers. Only we and Google run data centers with over 500,000 systems in the world. Those would be the only two of us who do it. We have to be able to run manufacturing lines, which is, again, kind of, we've done it with Xbox, but it's a new experience. We're trying to start slow, by the way, to make sure we get the kinks out before we go broad. We're writing new kinds of software. Machine learning and big data is really very different. It's more different than most people know. Programmers for my whole time at Microsoft actually thought you wrote programs where you took inputs, you ran it through your program, and you gave outputs that were either right or wrong. That's not the way big data and machine learning work. You set it, you put a bunch of inputs in, and you give an answer that's statistically likely to be closer to right than not. That's not what your average programmer thinks of as the way you write programs, and then you iterate, get more data, and do it again. That's what a search engine does. That's what a voice recognition system does. And in fact, that's what most of your systems will do over time. When you get into big data, it won't be about getting always the right answer. It'll be trying to statistically approximate what some user might have wanted from your institution. Andy, that was about the longest answer in the history of Q's and A's. So I'm going to stop there.
I'm going to rewrite some of these now.
I
mean, just to dig into a couple of points there. So there's a lot of attention on this device, the Surface device. And until now, my experience of Microsoft and the enterprise was the mouse. You know, it's a pretty good mouse, but that was it. You know, it was a great mouse. What does it mean that you're now producing your own device? And what are you trying to say? What are you trying to prove with the Surface?
We don't want there to be any seam, hardware, software innovation seam across which we are not innovating. In a sense, I would tell you that seam was one that was exploited by our competition. Between that and missing one cycle with our Windows Phone software, which kind of allowed Android to come into being despite the fact we were out first, you know, we're in the competition of the sort of the most competitive time in our lives since probably the early 90s. That's fun, that's exciting, that's interesting. But in a world of devices and services, it would be crazy for us to leave that boundary kind of unprobed from an innovation perspective. When I first showed this to some of our OEMs, they say, but there's no secret sauce software. You're licensing it all to us. And I said, yes, that's the point. It doesn't mean that we didn't make our software better because we designed a product that could be a tablet and a PC in a first-class way. With that said, I don't think this is the only form factor people are going to want. I think some people are going to want bigger screens. Some people are going to want more rigid keyboards. Some people are going to want built-in pens. Some people are going to want more powerful processors. So the notion that says one size fits all, I don't believe in, but we're going to keep charging. I think there's also something from a brand perspective. We can tell the story of Windows better if we are assured that there are pieces of hardware that tell the story of Windows. You know, one of the problems we're having right now is there are a ton. If you were to look at this table, you would say, yes, Windows 8 is about the coolest product on the planet. You might if you were me.
This is England, okay? Just
I know,
to make sure you understand that.
I'm doing my quaint American / Steve Ballmer thing. But anyway, if you were to go into, I was just in a roundtable with UK retailers, and if you were to go into any of their stores, you wouldn't see the same product lineup that you see here. So getting the right machines assorted with the right inventory and the right distribution at the right time, it's almost a little easier. You could say it must be nettlesome slightly in your relationship with your OEMs. It's certainly not been easy to go tell people you do a lot of business with. But what it does mean is they understand that we're serious about getting the right devices to market. Take this one. Here's we own this company now. And I don't know whether anybody's demonstrated it or not, but it's a Windows 8 slate, basically, 82 inches, which makes it a big Windows 8 slate. It's a Windows 8 slate with a pen. I don't know if they have the pen here, but it's a pen computer. There's one note on here. It doesn't seem to be. I have one in my office. I have no digital whiteboard. It replicates. All my notes are out there. I guarantee you we don't have an OEM who would build this product. There's too much risk. You might not sell them. And right now, the price is too high to sell them. But if you don't make the first one, you don't get down the cost curve. But when these things, and I think we can get there, are 10 grand or less, maybe 8 grand, I think we're going to see them in a lot of conference rooms because they're a great teleconference system, they're a great whiteboard system, they're a great meeting system, they're a great digital dashboard, if you will. You can see all the information changing live. But that thing won't happen if we just trust to an OEM ecosystem. So it's an example of the kind of thing where we can really, I think, help move our ecosystem forward, even if we don't wind up making and selling every machine. You guys are still going to say, hey, we have various needs. We want to have multiple vendors. We want to be able to bid these things out. We need ruggedized systems. We need a POS. We need da-da-da-da-da. We need our partners with us, and we need to have a way to lead our partners, and I think some of these devices help.
And with you're talking for the IT directors and CIOs in the room, when we see the adverts, which are, I can't believe I'm saying it, they're quite cool, these adverts are great, and when we see the stores opening up, that feels very consumer-based. Should we be really interested in this as an enterprise product?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I knew he was going to say that.
I think, look, come on, everybody gets it, right? The consumerization of IT, that's like real. I think everybody sort of gets it, and everybody's not quite sure when and how to embrace it. And the answer is, it's not all clear when and how to embrace the consumerization of IT. I think the one thing we all know as IT people, it's not really about bring your own device. I have not yet met an employee who has actually said, I'd prefer to pay for my own device than to have my company pay for it. So it's not really about I mean, maybe you have, but I think I get to pick, IT doesn't. That's what bring your own device kind of means. And yet, the responsibility for security is certainly with you. In some cases, you'll actually have to manage the device. In some cases, you won't manage the device, but you'll, what we like to call now, govern the device. Govern means you have to govern the security of corporate information that goes on the device. Today, the way we manage things is you control policy, you control what goes on the device, and we secure it essentially by making it a corporate asset. And bring your own device is kind of about allowing these devices to live a little bit outside the corporate management and security perimeter, and yet at the same time have security. Those are real phenomena. This device we're going to try to lead. We have a second one of these devices coming in February that's got an Intel Core processor on it, and it's really a traditional PC for all intent and purposes. It's a little bit heavier. It's got the Core processor. It runs Windows Pro. This runs Windows RT, which can be governed but not managed. Now, eventually, we may make it so it is governable and manageable. But do I see a role for this kind of device in the enterprise? The answer is yes. Will there be pressure for these kinds of devices in the enterprise? That's going to happen whether we kind of acknowledge it or not. So I think there's I think there's sort of a big opportunity. And again, we're kind of pushing on consumerization of IT, management versus governance. Yammer and Skype, they told me, our team told me there's some interest in those topics. They're all about probing the seam between bring your own device, bring your own cloud, and kind of centralized enterprise managed, which is how do you really put these things together. And I think if there's any company that has a vested interest in the talent to lead on that, it's us, and this device is part of it. I'm not going to tell you it's the only device you're ever going to need. On the other hand, I do see this showing up in enterprises. We had our first enterprise order the other day. We had an order for 2,000 from a large telco. Ordered 2,000 of these things for some of their folks. And that was interesting, let us say.
Great. So Windows 8 is a big news story, obviously, for Microsoft. As an IT professional myself, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience, we've just been through a big Windows 7 upgrade. I know some people are still on Windows XP. Why would people move? How are you going to take us with you?
Well, I think there are various cases here. Some people are putting in new systems and new applications. I'd sort of say to you, why would you start on the old stuff? Particularly when we really have done the job. Windows 8 computers are better computers. We run the same software. AV, there's a couple things where you always change but we're compatible, we're faster, we boot faster, we come on faster, out of sleep. I mean, it's just better. And so if you're starting, quote, on something new, I can't even begin to understand why somebody would start something new on 7. Some of you have kind of a regular refresh cycle for the machines that you own. You want to make us prove it, but I think it's just going to be a better solution. You can still use the same management infrastructure. It all works. Let us prove that to you. Some of you will say, hey, look, I've got systems that are 7 years old, that are running in locations hither and yon, and are dedicated to a specific task, a kiosk, a point of sale, a manufacturing system. And I would say, yes, we're interested in those too. but they may not be the first ones to move. Some of you will notice that we're hitting end of life on Windows XP. We believe in end of life. It's a good concept. It seemed like it was forever in the future when we put the policy in place, but 10 years seemed like a long time back then. If we have systems that are hitting end of life and you think they need additional support and management, we should work with you on that transition. But I don't actually think everybody should move every system immediately. I mean, do I think? Yes, I'd like you to. I don't actually think that's what's going to be happen in the real world on how these things progress.
I mean, similarly, again, so I'm a big fan of the Office software. Excel, my favorite piece of software in the world. But it feels like you kind of solved that problem back in 2003. 10 years ago, it was Office 2003, fantastic product. And it's been incrementally changing since then. What's in it for people? Why do they want to change now to Office 2013 and the future products? What's there for us?
Well, remember, one of the things we're doing about 3 or 4 different things in Office. Number one, we're trying to keep it current with modern platforms. The cloud, save to the cloud, store things in the cloud, whether it's the private cloud or the public cloud, whether it's the SharePoint cloud or the SkyDrive cloud. We want to make that really easy. We want to make these things to work really well with touch. If you bring up OneNote, it works very well in a touchable environment. It works, I don't know if they have the pen, it works very well in the environment, the platforms. That is my life, is a pen on this thing. So
if anyone hasn't
sad I don't see it. But so number one, we got to keep up with the platform. Number two, there are new capabilities, absolutely, that people want to see. For the person who uses Excel in their job, who authors the big models that we all use, believe me, they have a long list of things they want to see. For the person who designs the PowerPoint slides that some of us wind up using in our job, believe me, they have a list of things that they want. For the lawyer, who is our heaviest Word customer in some senses, they have a set of things they want. So there's a set of incremental features, there's a set of platform things, and then most importantly, there's a set of new scenarios. Link and Skype are probing new territory for us in terms of where we go with Office. As we think about the next generation of Office, I don't know, a year or something like that, again in the future, there are so many new scenarios that are enabled through mobility that we really want to get after. The notion of really going paperless. I look out in the audience, and it's not a paperless audience out there, and yet it's not just Windows that needs to make the world safe for paperless operation. It's actually the Office tools that have to embrace this in new and interesting ways. So new scenarios, meetings, reading, digital note-taking, digital meetings. The way we author documents. We author things to print them today. We're going to author them to read them on the screen. That needs to change. The way we navigate information. It's nice to talk about big data, but what's the exploration tool for big data? Well, it may not look like Excel, but it'll sure look like another component, at least if we have anything to say about it, of the Office family. I'll just tell you one story, which may resonate with you, and it may sound like the guy's just talking about his family, but I'll tell you the story anyway. I have a 13-year-old. The other night, I told him about 5 times to go do his homework, and I thought he was upstairs doing his homework, and he says, "Dad!" He screams down, "I've got to tell you about the coolest thing." Well, cool with him is always something about a new gadget or video game. I said, "Aaron, I told you to do your homework. I am doing my homework, but I have to tell you about the coolest thing." "What is it?" "Microsoft Word, Dad." He just installed, I got him on, we just got him set up. He'd installed Office 2013. I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I'm using the new Microsoft Word, Dad. It's just so beautiful. It's so crisp. It's so animated. It's so..." This is my 13-year-old who barely is expressive at any time in his life, sort of emoting. And I do think if you get people to sit down, I had some people send me an email the other. My 18-year-old says to me, "Dad, the SkyDrive integration in Office is fantastic. I really have everything all the time." And whether you want things saved on-prem or in the enterprise cloud or in the consumer cloud, it's just kind of built in and does the job. I happen to love the note-taking. That happens to be my favorite thing, and I use the thing entirely paperlessly. So I see a lot of new scenarios, Andy, and that we have gotten after and will continue to get after.
Great. If anyone from Microsoft is listening, I think Steve wants a pen, okay? We're getting that Steve needs a pen. So there's another thing you've touched on a couple of times, so just explore it a little bit more, because I know there was news yesterday about Messenger and Skype. The whole purchase of Yammer and Skype is interesting, from an external point of view, but it's a little confusing. So what's the long-term plan there?
Okay. How do I explain this in the simplest way? This is my first audience. I'm going to try to do this in a coherent forum so let me see how I do. I think in the modern world of bring your own device, we're also in a world of bring your own cloud. I think that is inevitable, and if we pretend to the contrary, we're putting our heads in the sand. We know it happens today. People will use non-IT infrastructure to do IT work, whether it's social, whether it's file storage, whether it is real-time communication, whether it is Skype or Dropbox or Facebook. People will do these things. So the question for us is, how do we sort of get on top of it? Getting on top of it involves a couple different things. Number one, you've got to do the right scenarios. Do the right scenarios. We didn't have a strong social play, frankly, until we bought Yammer. We get a strong social play. Number two, we've got to have the right model for the consumerization of IT. Consumerization of IT, by the way, doesn't not have the word IT in it. It has both consumer and IT. The Yammer model is really good for everybody in the room. It lets your workers start doing something, and it lets you get involved in a measured way to provide a level of IT governance and management that is desirable. Your people can start interacting socially in your work context without you ever knowing about it. And yet if you decide it's popular and important for you, you sign up with us and we give you tools to manage and govern that interaction, and yet still let people feel like they're involved in a consumer world. So in Yammer, we didn't just like the capability, I kind of like the model. I think it's not going to be the only model. Some things will still start IT out as opposed to the consumer in. Skype, we got the same issue. That one happens to be much more valuable if it's in the consumer world. There are very few companies where people only want to talk to other people in their company, which is kind of where we sit with Lync today. So we need to do the same Yammerish play between Skype and Lync. With the release of Office we're making now, we get interoperability of voice, we get interoperability of presence, we get interoperability of messages. We just don't get interoperability of video. We got to get that done, and I hope we get it done in the next 12 months. That would be our target. So literally, you could sit in a Skype session and a Lync session. What's the purpose of Lync? You still get enterprise management and control. What's the purpose of Skype? You still have availability to the 400 million odd users that we now have on the Skype system for the people who communicate. So there's a set of scenarios that are important. There's kind of let's call it a viral, bring your own cloud, but manage it kind of thing that we want to do across the board. We want to do the same thing with SkyDrive. You should be able to start out with SkyDrive in the consumer world, and then just let one of your users promote a folder to be enterprise managed. I know people want to do that. I know people put things in these consumerized things, and then they just want to control. They really don't feel good sometimes when they put enterprise data in that environment, but they don't know what else to do. And so we need to make it easy for you to, quote, control, not their whole life, not their pictures and the family, blah, 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 but just, hey, here's a folder for enterprise documents that gets managed and secured in a very, very, very different way. So scenarios, management model, and interoperability across that stack, I think, is very important. And so we're excited about Yammer because it's social and it's a new kind of management model. We're excited about Skype. We're excited about what we've done with SkyDrive. If you look in Office, it says, do you want to save to SkyDrive? SkyDrive Pro at Microsoft. Well, that's SharePoint. SkyDrive Pro at Microsoft, whether you run it on-prem or not. So we give you the kind of management capabilities, and people can put stuff in to enterprise or consumer infrastructure seamlessly from their Windows 8 machine.
And do you think you keep the brand names? I mean, Skype's become a verb, right? So
I'm not going to make any announcements, but will there be a day when probably somebody will say, does it need to be Skype and Link, or should we think of Link as Skype Pro or something? I'll bet somebody will say that to me someday. Just like SharePoint's file storage really gets called SkyDrive Pro at this stage. But we need to have video interoperability before I think it's credible to say that Link is Skype Pro.
Great. So last question before we open it up from me. In my presentation this morning, we talked a lot about how we use Azure, so I'm getting used to the pronunciation, Azure. I still find when I talk to some IT pros, they don't get it, they don't get the cloud. How do you help them overcome that? And where do you see the really innovative use of your cloud technology?
Yeah, I think it's important to divide from an enterprise perspective the cloud into kind of three buckets, because maybe it's easier to digest that way and get it. One is sort of special purpose applications that you really would never think about running on premise, but you're happy to subscribe to the cloud. And some of you have been doing this for 20 years. It wasn't called the cloud, but there are financial processing companies that have existed for many, many years who effectively provided cloud services. And there are special purpose applications that all companies subscribe to. In fact, that's in a sense what Bloomberg and all of the financial news tickers are. They're essentially cloud services delivered. I mean, we may not think of them that way, but that's one category. And there are more of those. When you look at the acquisitions that SAP and Oracle did of SuccessFactors and Taleo, those are special purpose HR applications delivered from the cloud. The second category is what I would call really important general purpose applications. That's where email falls, that's where file storage falls, that's where CRM falls, that's where ERP falls. Some people get a little skitzier on some of those. It's like, whoa. They get a little skitzier because they don't seem, the special purpose, you say, I couldn't deal with that anyway, I don't know how to think about it. But then you'll get to a set of applications that seem pretty important. And will you trust them to the cloud? When do you trust them to the cloud? I was talking to our ERP team the other day, our Dynamics AX team, and they said, could you really, we're moving aggressively to the cloud, but there's always an engineer who will say, do you really think this is going to work? Will our customers trust us? I mean, with the general ledger in the cloud? I said, come on. None of the important financial information in the company's in the general ledger. It's all in email. Well, come on. If you want to find out what the earnings are before earnings get announced, you're better off to look in the CEO's email than you are in the general ledger system at most companies. So, that's why I think I can treat these. I'm not trying to be flip, but I think we have to, and certainly the reliability for things which are operational in nature as opposed to GL. But this is where you start getting into reliability, and security is very fundamental. And people are getting over the hump on these. We see that with the sort of rise of our own dynamic CRM product and Salesforce, who's done a very good job. Got to compete with them. We've seen it in the rise of Office 365. This is kind of moving, and I would say most IT people get it. They're not sure it's right for them yet. They're not sure it saves them money yet. They've got their implementation tuned, but people are starting to get it. ERP is the edge where people start, Then you go one further step over, and that's where you say, what do I do with my bespoke applications? Should I put those in the cloud? And that's where I would say it's about the platform in the cloud. That's where Azure fits in. And this is where I think it's still kind of more alien territory. People say, I don't really know what it's going to cost me to run my app in the cloud, because people charge me for cycles and storage and all these funny things, and you got to do a little bit of math to actually figure it out, and it's not always easy math to do relative to what you would do on premise. People aren't as sure about some of the reliability and security characteristics, but I think this too will happen as Andy has done. I won't say Andy's on the bleeding edge, just on the bleeding edge, if I could say it that way. I mean, these are early. It's not what most enterprises have done yet, and yet to me it's obviously a path that the world will go. It becomes obvious when you talk about big data apps. The number of companies who will run big data infrastructure on premise or even hosted is de minimis. It's just too hard to set up. It's too hard to run. It'll be too easy to subscribe to big data infrastructure from us or one of the guys we compete with. And that will really, I think, be some of the leading edge stuff that gets people to understand that you can put platforms in the cloud as opposed to just put with your bespoke apps, as opposed to just put finished applications in the cloud. That may have been long-winded and not simplifying, but I think if you think about it in the 3 buckets, I think most people sort of get bucket number 1, but don't think about it. I think everybody's starting to get bucket number 2, and I think bucket number 3 is still bleeding edge by and large.
Great, thanks. So we'll take some questions from the audience now. Yes, sir.
Apologies for mentioning the I word, but the iPad does exist. It's out there. Do you see any likelihood that Microsoft would embrace a place where it would help to make those devices enterprise capable in a Microsoft enterprise stack? To make it so that Office and everything that goes with it, the email, even AD, that device was capable of being an enterprise device, because Apple are never going to get there on their own with Microsoft.
Well, there are kind of 2 or 3 different aspects of that. Number 1 is, could we? And the answer is probably, maybe, sort of, kind of, if Apple collaborated. I don't know if that's high likelihood, but it might be, but might not be. It's a tough collaboration for 2 arch competitors, I would say, and but you can say, hey, all the management that exists on the iPad today, we delivered anyway. It's all delivered through our Exchange Active Sync protocol, which we licensed to Apple, and which they've embraced to their credit. That'd be number 1. Number 2 is, if we could do that, can we really reproduce our environment on the iPad? Well, the truth of the matter is there are things we do that are designed to work with the keyboard and the mouse. There are things that we're designed to do that need hardware security. So there are a set of things that might be hard to do, even if Apple was collaborating on the things we would need from them. And then the number 3 thing is, given that we got our hands pretty full, I mean, competing with them, we got our hands pretty full. You got to, if you're in our shoes, you got to say, hey, how much priority should we put on getting the iPad right before we get Windows 8 completely right and Surface completely right? I mean, I don't want to sound like a kook, but you're supposed to take care of your family before you take care of the next guy's family. Last time I checked, it's sort of a human nature. And so, guys come up for air and say, I got a little extra time. We keep our Mac apps going. So it's clear we're not, what should I say, religious crazies. We keep the Mac apps going. We make a good business on the Mac. It's also clear the iPad today is not a PC replacement. These things are, Office itself really makes sense in that environment. And so we're trying to get our Windows 8 stuff right. I'm not saying we can't collaborate with Apple. We just don't. It's just sort of, it's a weird dance, probably at best. And then they'd have to embrace that the scenarios, they'd have to embrace from a system design perspective the scenarios we're talking about. There was a rumor this week that they're going to throw Intel out of the Macs and put their ARM processors in, and not quite sure I can tell you where they're headed. And they don't share it with us. We actually don't have the same kind of, what should I say, tumultuous interactions with Apple that we do with some of our other competitors. They're not that way, really. They weren't even with Jobs. We've been doing Mac apps for years. People may even remember we owned 5% of Apple in 1997 as part of, sort of the modern rebirth. On the other hand, we're pretty busy right now. But we do get customer feedback. There are things customers, even if we don't get the full environment, there seem to be some things customers would like us to do and that we may be able to do, and we're trying to sift that through. Even if we can't do it all, is there a piece we could do that might not turn it into a PC, but would still deliver some value that customers want? And our guys are kind of sorting that through.
Great. Any other questions over this side? Great, thank you.
Hi. I just wanted to ask a question about Windows 8 Phone. It's the one area that we've got in the business that we're really struggling to get to terms with. It's just mobile phone and consumerization and people all wanting either an Android or an iOS. And I haven't really heard much around the anticipations of how Windows Phone 8 will fit into the business, the enterprise business.
Well, ironically, I think last night I was reading a review, which heartened me, that reminded us that the new Windows phones are the best phones for enterprise purposes. I mean, what we've done with the new Windows Phones 8 is we actually we have the top of the operating system and the bottom of the operating system. We're missing a little bit of the middle of Windows 8, but all of the driver layers, the security layer, pretty much we've brought over to the platform. I mean, you have to check a checklist and go through it, but I think we have probably the best enterprise offer. We still don't have physical keyboards. Some people say, hey, look, you're not really enterprise until you replace BlackBerry. The truth is, we haven't found operators who are willing to sell phones with physical keys on them at this stage. The operators reject them, which means none of the manufacturers will make them, which means none of us will design them. And that's why they are fading fading into oblivion. I do think there's a lot of things in our design that make this particularly appealing. If you own Windows 8, this is the best phone for you. There's no question. It has been designed with complementary UI, complementary applications, complementary cloud infrastructure, all of which I think is extremely important. I think we've got kind of the right security and governance model for you to implement, but we also know we're going to have to get the consumers to be excited about the proposition in order to get the enterprises excited about pushing that. And you'll see us advertise these things. I think we start sale today, tomorrow, next week, something here in the UK with both Nokia and, this is a Nokia device, but with both Nokia, HTC, and Samsung on the high end, and then Huawei and a set of people on the low end. But they're beautiful phones. They have good price. Whether you can get your operator to reflect that through to you in a lower price is another question. The subsidy model makes it tough. This would sell to an operator for probably $200 less than an iPhone sells to the operator, and the operator right now just eats that cost. I would say, here I have live information on stocks. Here's my favorite. These are the OneNote notes. I created them on the PC. They're roamed through. This is a list of all the companies represented in the room today. It was an Excel table pasted into OneNote, roamed through the cloud infrastructure. If I logged in here,
only we had the pen. If only we had the
pen. Thank you, Andy, for setting me up. The thing that's great is I can make a pen annotation on my tablet. I can sort of use the pen and annotate. Those things show up. It just really works, and it really works for enterprise scenarios, I would say. Really, really super well. The tiles are all live, which makes it great for sort of flagging key corporate information. Comes live and personal and tailored on the phone. So I'm enthusiastic. You would expect me to be, but I encourage you to take a look at it and see if it meets your needs.
That's great. We've got time for one more question.
Hello. Great. So I'm one of the few non-UK companies in the room. I'm from the Italian Post. And my question is a lot connected to this, but please permit me to say something earlier than that. As a postal operator, it's the second time I have the chance to listen to you the last few months. I was also in Seattle at the CIO Summit. Please use the paperless word in a different way. It's a bad word for a postal company. It's one of the words that... It's completely forbidden in our company to use that word. Just saying that you love...
How digital? Would that work for you better?
Hybrid. I love to buy stamps. I love to send postcards and stuff like that. No, I'm kidding, but I need to say
But you're kidding, but you're not. Let me say it's a good reminder, and I do actually have a customer who's even bigger than the Posts, who reminds me of this too, and that's HP. HP also would prefer me to find different lingo. And as our largest customer, if you look at the Post, in most countries, the Post would be our first or second largest customer just based on
that was the main reason. I mean, we give you a lot of money. So
I'm going to move. I'll move to the word digital, sir.
Thank you. No, my question refers to something that I love of the Windows 8 concept, that it's multi-device. It goes from a smartphone to the smart TV. You still don't talk a lot about the smart TV, but I want to concentrate my question about the smartphones. Windows 8 is a great solution. Windows Phone 8 is a great solution. It's a lot. You're addressing it at the moment to the consumer world. But, for example, in our company, we have 30,000 rugged devices that run on Windows Mobile 6.5, and nobody from the Microsoft side is discussing with us how to move for our internal business processes to the new operating system. So this was my question.
Yeah, let me kind of nod because I'm going to get somebody to send an email on it. The thing we've worked hard on, and I think we're now in a position to we kind of have a little proving ourselves to do, let me say, with Windows Phone. And I think we've sort of crossed the chasm with some of what I would call our embedded systems partners who would tend to serve you. Motorola, I don't know who you buy from, but I've spent a lot of time on this issue specifically with Motorola, which is for mobile ruggedized devices, whether they're in postal trucks or on grocery chain kind of aisleways. You know, what will our stuff work well in that environment for them? And I think you will see the embrace, which now allows us, because unless we get those ecosystem partners working with us, it's not about bringing this device in for every driver for the post. It's really about working with guys who specialize. That's true in a lot of the companies in this room. You will have a class of applications which are really, in some senses, special purpose and or ruggedized, whether that's kiosks in airports, checkout. We were talking about check-in and customer assistance, baggage handling, manufacturing operations, postal drivers, and we're working hard with a set of OEMs who focus on taking these technologies and targeting them to those environments. And this one's clearly on my radar, so we'll get our guys to follow up with you.
Great. So we're going to close up now. I think just for me, looking back 10 years ago, if we all look back 10 years ago, Google were a search engine, Amazon was a book company, Apple was a niche computer company. Who would have known these guys are all competitors to you in some way or form today? Where do you think the next 10 years is going to go? Where do you think the next challenge for Microsoft is going to be coming from, and how are you going to respond to it?
Well, it's one of the great things. Keeps your heart moving too. It's one of the great things about our industry, which is everybody. Things are always morphing, and the job has got to be how do you be successful with your customers today and anticipate what they're going to want 5 and 10 years. You can't build for 10 years out. We used to think you could actually, but it's not sane. You can build capability, talent, skills, but you got to build products for 1, 2, and 3 years out. That's kind of a sensible time frame. As we look out to the future, I can tell you, I'm sure we'll have one company that barely exists today who'll be on the list of guys we compete with. I'm sure one of the guys on the list that you mentioned will not be a significant player anymore in that time frame. I trust and will drive to make sure it's not us. I think it'll be one of the other guys. And at the same time, somebody else who is in the industry but maybe hasn't spread their wings is likely also to come back in the game. You didn't put Samsung. Is Samsung a partner? They're a partner to everybody. They're a competitor. They're kind of a funny company right now. They're one of our good customers, and yet every time they advertise those Android devices, I'm not a happy dude, I would say. So the world is going to morph. For me, the real question is, what are the technologies that'll really pop? And it comes from technology back to competition. I think form factor evolution will continue. If Intel pioneered computers as personal, and we pioneered really from a popularity standpoint computers as graphical, and Apple pioneered computers as low power and touchable, the question is, what's the next such form factor UI revolution? We think there's some big ideas in our labs that we're working on, but so are the other guys. And I think that'll be critical when you do the analysis that you said. Machine learning, there are only 2 companies that know anything about it right now, Google and Microsoft. Really. I mean, there are companies that do it in a narrow way, but if you don't run a search engine, you just aren't getting the volume, really, of understanding of the big problem is, how do you know everything about what the world knows? Crawling the web is kind of a big part of that. And so I think, that gives the 2 of our companies some kind of natural edge up, because I think it's one of the big phenomena. And then who's going to invent the next important application scenario? That's a big deal. Who's going to really take you to the cloud? It's not going to be the guy who's not building cloud infrastructure. You got to be both on cloud and in prem, and I think we have got some advantages there. So new applications, new form factors. The cloud is a back-end platform, and machine learning are kind of the four things I think that will shape. I feel like we're well poised because we have muscles in all those directions.
Great. Seems like a great point.
Andy, Steve, thank you very much. Apologies, Steve has to run now to another event, so I wanted to wrap up and say thank you very much for the show.
Thanks, Andy.